Welcome. Thank you for joining us here on At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson, and this week and next week we have an opportunity to talk to two of the candidates for the 18th Congressional District race. For the first time in 14 years, the incumbent is not running for the 18th Congressional position. And with that, I'd like to welcome Sheldon Schaefer, the Green Party candidate for the 18th Congressional District. Sheldon, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. We're real excited to be at the table. And let me tell folks a little bit about my experience here in Peoria. I've been around for the last 32 years at Lakeview Museum, and I've been the lead educator there, the director of the planetarium. And since 1980, I've also been teaching part-time at Bradley University.
Thank you, Sheldon. And joining us also is the Democratic Party candidate, Colleen Callahan, and welcome to the program.
Thank you, H.
And you have broadcasting background.
I do, much like Sheldon, 30 plus years in our community and in my profession. You and I colleagues oftentimes as we continue our broadcast efforts to help educate and inform.
And with that, we will tell you that the Republican candidate, Aaron Schock, chose not to participate. We asked him the first time in July, made repeated requests of the campaign to participate in this, and they indicated that they were not going to make this a joint appearance. And with that, we will begin. This is not a debate. This is a conversation between the two candidates. They are free to exchange as they see fit. There is no stopwatch on this. By flip of the coin that I conducted earlier, Colleen will go first with the first topic, and we will just alternate back and forth. And I think one of the most important issues facing Americans right now is jobs. 8 straight months we've gone with a loss of jobs. Unemployment is up across the board, nationwide, statewide, Peoria, McLean, Knox County. What specifically will you do to help create more jobs and good paying jobs in the 18th Congressional District?
Well, you know, H, our campaign headquarters is located right next to not a homeless shelter, but it is an opportunity for people who are unemployed, out of work, to come throughout the day and utilize that facility so that they can try and help themselves find jobs. And every day when I come in, they'll say, Ms. Callahan, is there something that you can do to help us get a job? So I'm only underscoring what we do here every day in our own backyard. And that being said, when you look at more people on food stamps in Illinois than ever before, there is an exclamation point to your question here. And so where do you begin? And it's not just about a few jobs, it's jobs that are paying jobs at a level that you said good paying jobs was your question. For me, it has to begin with the economy in general and how we become more independent in our community and ultimately in our country. And that begins with the emphasis on renewable energy. It begins by creating jobs. And when we announced our energy plan several weeks ago, it is an 11-point plan that, bottom line, creates new jobs. Because in the process, when you begin to work with renewable, sustainable agriculture, becoming more energy independent and consequently more economically independent, you do build those jobs. And when you bring businesses in who are interested in building the towers for our new wind generators, when you bring businesses in that you have ethanol plants, whether it is the corn-based or whether you move to the next generation of cellulosic, when it's sustainable all across the board, it creates jobs. And it starts here, and it starts as a two-pronged approach because it's a domino effect. You build up and you build out.
Sheldon.
Well, and certainly energy is one of the opportunities we have, and we've been talking a lot about green jobs. I also look at the green jobs bill that passed Congress this past year, and looking at it, it hardly produced any jobs. It was sort of like an add-on for effect, but not for any substance. And it produced a numbering in the hundreds of jobs, and we should be creating bills like that, the number in the thousands and thousands of jobs. So why it came through Congress with so little impact, I don't know, but it certainly gave the opportunity to revisit, at least in my campaign, we're talking a lot about revisiting bills like that, but making it a serious part of a bill. You know, we're certainly talking about green energy and visiting the wind farms. Each of these wind farms is going to be a construction project minimum of 2 years, and Illinois is blessed with one of the greatest opportunities in the country for the introduction of wind. We're fairly close to large markets, and we're fairly close to a substantial grid. There's going to be jobs not just creating the wind farms, but maintaining the wind farms. They need people out there every day. If you have 100 windmills, 2 are down at any one time. You need service, and you need creating jobs for that sector. Illinois State University now has this program about renewable sustainable energy as a major. So we're creating jobs there. Certainly in the environment, we're going to be creating jobs in that same kind of philosophy. And the other day I went down to Springfield actually to visit one of the high schools to do a campaign thing in a high school, which I think will appear eventually on public access, but I'd never been to a high school like this. It was a career-oriented high school, and I was talking to the administrator afterwards, and I said, what kind of school is this, and where are they? Are there others? And he said, well, unfortunately, as a spin-off of No Child Left Behind, most of these have disappeared. So we're seeing, even in our education system, and policies of the past administration have really worked against the job future in taking away these career high schools. They said, we're teaching to the test now. They can only come here for half a day. We need to resurrect those kinds of things in our education system, preparing students. It had an engine lab, it had TV labs, it had radio labs, it had computer labs. It was looking at all the different job possibilities at the high school level as pre-college or not pre-college. And again, those things have disappeared because of No Child Left Behind. So you look for jobs in a number of different places. You can look at them at the high school preparation level. You can look at them in the green energy level. You can look at it in the green job bills. Those are all different initiatives we want to get more engaged with.
I want to put you more on the spot. What role does Congress play, you as the 18th district representative, in terms of making sure those jobs appear? I mean, right now, we can go ahead and build wind farms if companies decide to do so. Is there a role for government? Is it incentive-oriented? What is the role that you might play?
Well, I'd say certainly the production tax credits, which the current philosophy is they seem to go 2 years at a time, and I certainly want to talk about the fact that we need longer term thinking on all of these. The production tax credits, which have spurred a lot of the wind investment, are going to be disappearing, and we need bills that make them sustainable past a single administration or past a single term of a congressperson. So that's certainly one role that Congress has to play in it all. And in terms of No Child Left Behind, you know, even because that has connections to jobs, we need to be looking at how to address from the education side, from the high school education side. The bill has impact even at the local level, because if we take away the requirement for testing, then local or requirement for the testing, teaching to the test, then states can get back to doing what they should be doing, which is teaching towards not just an academic track, but towards a career track and towards a college or non-college.
I think, H, your question was about should the Congress have a role in helping create these jobs, maybe sustain these jobs, and the answer is yes, in my opinion. And one of the ways that you can do that is one of the ways that is currently being discussed, and it is the Patriot Employers Act, where it does, you use the word incentive. Do you give incentives? And yes, you do. Don't we all function better and more quickly and more positively with incentives? And so the way to do that, as is outlined, is to encourage companies and businesses, one, to maintain their headquarters in our country, not to move out of the country, and to keep employees here and encourage them to expand with jobs and then new jobs as they expand, and to encourage these same companies to help train or retrain our veterans as they return from the war. And you allow for that incentive and that encouragement by a tax credit, and you reward when you do the right thing by helping your country and helping your citizens. After all, the number one priority of a country is its citizen security, and we feel very insecure right now when it comes to even our own selves and how we're going to get up every day and fend for ourselves financially. So yes, it is our obligation.
And one more thought on that, because you brought up the tax aspect of it. Certainly we have tax incentives that seem to, as you said, encourage companies to move overseas. And one of the really green parts of our platform is that we want to see the tax field leveled, especially for local business. Local business keeps money in the community. And certainly I see the effect of that in this community all the time, that, you know, the large national chains are not supporting the community, except those that are based here. But all those other chains give their support elsewhere. Local businesses are the lifeblood of the nonprofit sector in this community, of the involvement in the community. We need to eat local, buy local, shop local, and we need to level the tax playing field so that companies are encouraged to be local.
Both of you mentioned energy in your response with regard to job creation. So let's move on to the energy issue. What specific energy sources should we be looking at? You've both mentioned wind. Let's go beyond that. What are the options available to us in terms of energy sources, and can this nation become energy independent?
I think certainly the nation can become energy independent, and I've seen plans from environmental groups and from energy-oriented groups that say absolutely. One of the concerns I bring to the table is a concern for carbon footprint, because energy has to be related to global climate change. So we should be looking primarily at energy which is not going to increase our carbon footprint, and strategies for moving those along preferentially, because in 10 years we're going to have serious concerns about carbon output, and we might be up against a brinksmanship kind of up against the wall, but $700 billion bailout's not going to work when we're talking about that. So we're looking at not just wind, but solar and geothermal are certainly opportunities we have, and there have been, just in the course of this campaign, several breakthroughs in solar, which is going to make another increasingly huge opportunity. We've got in this area 191 clear days a year. That's enough for solar to be economical, especially with the breakthroughs at MIT that were reported a few weeks ago in new solar films and new storage technologies which keep it on the grid in a more even sort of way. So that's a big part of it.
Yes, we can become energy independent. Several weeks ago, we announced in our energy plan that I referenced earlier our support of the 25 by 25 plan. It's a concept that helps us become 25% energy independent through renewable energy by the year 2025. And it does include many of the sources that Sheldon just referenced. And in addition to that, when you're talking about wind, when you're talking about solar, when you're talking about renewable and sustainable, part of the core of that is working with Mother Nature rather than against her. And isn't it interesting that we have that old line that we all know that says you just can't fool Mother Nature, and yet we've tried to do that in some instances with many of our attempts drilling, while you have to be open to that. You have to be open-minded. And while I have said all along I will be open-minded to drilling and open-minded to nuclear, the Mother Nature component of this is that she gave us the wind, and when you look back through our history and you look at a lot of old photographs or old paintings, what do you commonly see? A windmill. And it was used then for energy purposes on farms primarily. And then you look at Mother Nature, who also gave us the sun. And then you look at Mother Nature, who also gave us the soil. And that's where the renewable, replenishable crops come in. Whether it's corn, or whether it's soybeans, or whether it's switchgrass, or whether it is fiber that comes from wood chips. And so to work in concert with Mother Nature and the environment is a key component of helping us become energy independent. Now, to answer, can we do this? Yes, we can. We only have to look at Brazil, who in some cases uses 100% biodiesel and renewable energy for their sources. So we can do it.
You mentioned that you're open to drilling and open to nuclear. Be more specific.
Well, in our energy plan that we outlined, it does not include drilling and it does not include nuclear energy. Yet, reality says when it comes time to discuss becoming energy independent, we do have to consider drilling. It's not my way or the highway. You do have to be open-minded, as I've said I would be, but I would prefer, if and when we drill, and we probably will, that we make certain that we are environmentally sensitive where we drill and using the kind of technology that we now have today that we didn't have a few years ago. We're still paying the price on the Exxon Valdez complication. So I'm just saying, when we do it, if and when we do it, that we make certain we have the highest level of sensitivity that we haven't had in the past.
Illinois has more coal reserves than Saudi Arabia has oil. Illinois is at the leading edge of technology in terms of clean coal technology. What's your position on using coal-powered plants?
Well, the League of Women Voters, who I have a lot of respect for, has called for a 10-year moratorium on new coal-fired plants until carbon sequestering is finally brought to the marketplace as a practical application. And there are some who are saying that carbon sequestration isn't going to work, although I've got just a nice article from Science News this past couple weeks ago that went through the various strategies and techniques that are actually coming to some close to being practical. So I think we're going to have carbon sequestering. I think the League of Women Voters is spot on in saying we should hold off on advancing coal because clean burning coal is only part of the problem. The other part is the carbon footprint. So we need to push, and we need to push in a big way, not in just giving lip service to the research that's being done in bringing carbon sequestration to a practical standpoint. And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot, putting money into the basic foundations of research that bring these new things forward. And that's where government does have a very important role. Let the free market work afterwards, but let's push the fundamental basic research.
Our energy plan that I referenced to is up and available on our website and does address the carbon footprint. And to your question about our coal reserves here in Illinois, we can't overlook that. It is a source of energy that we do have to consider. It's right here. It has been given to us, if you will, by the landscape, by the lay of the land. And when you talk about utilizing that coal, clean burning coal, you talk about bringing new business in, and you certainly have to quickly include FutureGen. You also have to include for years, and I don't recall how many times I have done interviews with Dick Breckenridge, who works for the state of Illinois and who is directly involved and has been for years in carbon sequestration. And as the current president of the Chicago Farmers Organization, which seems like an oxymoron. What do you mean, Chicago farmers? Are there farmers that live in Chicago? Well, actually, once a month, the Chicago Farmers, who has membership primarily among people who own land and who are interested in learning more about that land ownership and the changes that are occurring in agriculture. Several months ago, I asked Dick Breckenridge to make a presentation to the Chicago Farmers Group about carbon sequestration. And he brought in a member of the Delta Group. And it is an opportunity that we have that is already in place because there is already a carbon exchange that's based in Chicago. And the European countries are already much farther advanced than we are. But it is a system that is in place and that we are beginning to adapt and adopt to here in this country. And it's right here in Illinois. That carbon exchange is in Chicago.
Let's stay on the topic with cap and trade and carbon tax. Do you have a position on either one of those?
Well, I've talked to many groups about the cap and trade. You can go a lot of different directions on cap and trade. You fill out a lot of surveys. You're asked about your positions on that. On cap and trade, it seems on the surface to be one that we really need to consider as we move forward. And it is an old cliche to say the devil is in the details, but it really does seem to me that the devil is in the details here, because you talk about, well, do you tax here, do you tax at this rate, and who gets taxed, and do you get some exemption before you start? I think it certainly is a consideration that we have to consider before I'd say thumbs up, thumbs down. I want to know a little bit more about how we're going to do this before I say if I think we're ready to do it right now.
And yeah, the Sierra Club has talked about cap and trade, but they've sort of preferred to use the term cap and auction, because we don't just want to make it free out there. There needs to be some cost applied to it. And then the devil certainly can be in the details, because on NPR there was a report about 3 weeks ago of they did a study about how this would work then on the free market. And there are certainly because the free market is sometimes driven by greed, that bad things can happen. And so we've got to be very careful as how we structure the system, because what the researchers found in studying the free market playing out of this was that if you weren't careful, there would be an opportunity for one company to start buying it all up and hoarding it, and then jacking the price up by their actions, and then trying to resell it at inflated prices. So we've got to guard against that for sure. There needs to be an expense, but we've got to watch and listen to the market economists and see how to do it, so we don't have it becoming a commodity that can be manipulated much as oil is. That would be just as bad. We wouldn't be gaining anything. So I absolutely say we have to be going that direction, but we have to look at the European models and see how they've avoided some of these pitfalls.
Let's dovetail right into global warming. Specifically, what is a congressman's role in terms of global warming? Is it primarily man-generated, and how does the government go about playing its role in curtailing any excess?
Well, in energy production, that's one of the big areas in carbon footprint and the things we're just talking about, that the government has to treat it seriously, and we have to act on it. And in fact, when the Undersecretary to Bush's, or when the science advisor to the Undersecretary of Bush's Undersecretary of Agriculture was in town, he said, you know, it is real, it is human caused, and we have to act on it with our policies. Our policies have to be looking at carbon output, and that goes everywhere from automobiles to energy production. It affects our strategies towards drilling. It affects our strategies towards coal. And certainly, deep in the administration, they acknowledge that it's human caused. I can also say that I've been personally involved in understanding the studies and teaching the studies since 1988. We first produced a program on climate change. Well, that's 20 years ago. We've been treated to by many of the principals in this election as though it's something new, and I hear conservatives say it's a liberal conspiracy, but they're listening to the wrong sources, and they're listening to old data. We've been talking since 1988 about it, and just this past year was a major sea change in our understanding of it. So anybody who's talking about differences is back in the 2002 era.
Let me turn to Colleen.
Clearly the research would show that it is man-made. What's government's role? We've had an opportunity here with the Kyoto Protocol that we did not sign on to. It is our obligation, it is our duty to do what we need to do. As I said, the government's first responsibility is the security of its people. And if we begin to put our citizens at risk because of environmental hazards, if we're breathing in air that is unclean, as an example, that can cause health problems, that is part of our secure society. And so we do need to be an example. and we have not been. Now, if we do our part and other countries don't do theirs, you say, well, okay, we're going to do what we do, but our neighbor doesn't do what he or she is supposed to do, and that undoes what we attempted to do. I go back to, we have to work together, and we have to start somewhere, and we have to be an example. And by not signing on with the Kyoto Protocol, we didn't do our part.
And with that, we have run out of time in our first half hour. Both Sheldon Schaefer and Colleen Callahan have agreed to appear next week on At Issue. And once again, for those of you who've been watching, Aaron Schock's campaign chose not to participate in this exchange of ideas on At Issue. We'll be back next week with Sheldon Schaefer and Colleen Callahan. Thank you so much for being with us on At Issue.